is, the idea with the limit laws, and the limit laws will be something that we kind of use throughout the semester as we start learning about derivatives, integrals at the very end of the semester. This is kind of a real theoretical part of the idea of a limit and kind of comes into play when we develop other ideas. So these are the different laws. They're pretty self-explanatory, I think, and they're pretty logical to students typically. So we have like a sum law, which says you can break up a limit of two functions into two limits. Difference law works basically the same way. We have a constant multiple, and product law, quotient kind of go together. Then we have the power and root laws. Now, what we're going to do is just kind of go through examples of each on the next couple of pages. So you don't need to really write anything on this. These are just things that you want to know and kind of study, and I'll show you the kind of problems that I want you to be able to do on this. You won't be doing this a lot, and my experience usually with this is students usually get the right numeric answer almost always on these problems, but sometimes struggle a little bit with the idea of a property. So let's go on to the next page, and let me show you kind of what we're doing here. The idea is, this is just a good way to test students on whether they're learning this or not. So what I'm doing is I'm giving you the three different limits. These are three different functions. We have f of x, we have a limit of g of x, a different function, and then we have a limit as h of x as x goes to 2. And notice that all those limits are two-sided limits, x going to 1. They all have to be the same, approaching the same thing on this. So what I'm going to try to do is display this in such a way so you can see this hopefully okay. So we can kind of look at these properties and identify the property, and I'll show you how to do this okay. All right, so if we look at this, what we have here is anytime you have a number times a function. This property 3 is what this one is basically talking about. So let me kind of just have you write down what the property is, just for kind of a record here. So property 3 basically says, if you have a number that's being multiplied by a function, then you can take that and bring that outside of the limit. So you want to write this down like this. You want to write that this is equal to 4 times the limit as x approaches 1. You need to make sure you write the x approaches 1 of f of x like that. That's what property 3 tells you can do, okay? Now, what you do is I told you what the limit of f of x is. I told you that that limit is 8, right? So what I can do is I can just do 4 times 8. So that will give me an answer of 32. That's just demonstrating the property for now. So there's these 7 properties, and if you have an algebra situation, these properties help you to figure this out. You couldn't figure that 32 out on this problem unless you knew that property 3. There wouldn't be any way to do that, okay? All right, now let's go to B. Now look at my properties. I'll just kind of, that might be a little fuzzy to you there, but any thought about which of those 7 would help you to do this problem? Number 5, exactly. You got a quotient. So what this property 5 says is it says if you have a limit of a fraction, you just do the limit of the top and the limit of denominator separately. So you want to write this like this. Okay, you want to write this as the limit as x goes to 1 of f of x divided by the limit x goes to 1 of h of x like that. Okay, so that's what property 5 says you can do, which is pretty logical. Now, the part of the problem that students almost always do fine is just do the arithmetic. I told you the limit of f of x was 8. See, that was given. I told you that the limit of h of x was 2. So we get 8 divided by 2 is 4. So that gives an answer to that limit of 4 like that. So if you have a limit of a quotient, you can do the top and bottom separately. Okay? All right. Any problems so far? Okay. All right. We'll start kind of simple here. What do you think would be helpful on problem C? Probably 2, the difference law. Exactly. So this is property 2. And what property 2 says is if you're doing a limit of the difference of 2 functions, then you just do the limit of the first. So you want to write, make sure that you write down what you're doing with these properties instead of just getting the answer in your head. And then we have the limit x goes to 1 of g of x like that. Okay, so that's how that goes. And then it's pretty easy to finish up. The limit of f of x was given as 8. The limit of g of x was given as 3. So 8 minus 3 is equal to 5. Okay, so that's what property 2 tells you can do. Okay, it's sort of almost like order of operations in a way. Okay, all right, any problems so far? Okay, generally students don't have any problem getting the answer right, but a lot of times they don't do a good job of writing down what the property says, particularly as they get a little more advanced here. Okay, let's look at part D now. Now part D, you got more than one property. There's 2 properties that will help you on this problem. What I see in this problem is I see a fraction, right? But I also see a product of 2 numbers. So what's going to help me on this one is the quotient law, because I have a quotient. And the other thing that's going to be helpful is number 4. So we're going to use both 4 and 5 at the same time. Now, what I prefer students do is to kind of do this in this order like this. We're going to go ahead and work with the fraction first. So we're going to go ahead and do the limit of f of x, g of x, like that. Just don't do anything with that. Don't separate that up. Just do the quotient law first of all. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to divide that by the limit of h of x like that. So that's what the quotient law tells us that we can do, is to do that. Okay, so that would be what property 5 is telling us. So we got that just like we had on that problem B a minute ago. Now the product rule, we're going to break up the numerator like this. So we're just going to write this as the limit x goes to 1 of f of x times, and then we're going to do the other limit. We're going to do the limit of g of x as x approaches 1 like that, and then we'll bring down that limit in the bottom like that. Now when I test over this, down the road several weeks from here, I would be okay if, like on a test, what I'm always wanting is the right answer, but I also want you to show me that you can break it up. So if you bypass this step, I would be okay if you just put that on your paper. But technically you're doing this, then you're breaking that up into a product like that. So there's 2 properties going on the same problem. Okay, now if you look above at what I gave you that the f of x limit was 8. I gave you the g of x limit was 3, and the h of x limit was 2. So I'm really just doing 8 times 3 over 2. So you could just go 24 over 2. So that limit is equal to 12. Okay, so that's the answer on that. And like I say, getting the 12 usually is not a hard part for students, just plugging the numbers in and calculating. But I do want you to understand the properties because they're going to be real important later on in the semester when we start dealing with derivatives and integrals. Okay, so that's the idea. Okay, any problems so far? Okay, all right, let's kind of go to this next one here. Now this one you have a root like this. So we have a root law. Anytime you have like a square root or something, then you want to use this root law. So we're going to start this one with property number 7. And what property number 7 says, it says if you have a limit of a root, it can be a square root or a third root or whatever, then what you do is you do the third root of the limit. So you make that big third root symbol, and then underneath that you do the limit x goes to 1 of f of x, g of x, and then plus 3 like that. Okay, so that's what property 7 says you can do. Okay, now there's another property. There's 2 other properties I'm going to use on this problem. What do you think? What do you think would be useful? I mean, what do you see? I see a product. What else? I see a sum. Okay, there's a addition and there's a product right there. Now, if you wanted to go ahead and break this up into one step, you could. I'm just going to do 2 steps to do this. I'm going to go ahead and do the sum law, which is rule number 1. And rule number 1, you're going to break this up into the limit x goes to 1 of f of x, g of x, plus, and then the other limit would be the limit x goes to 1 of 3 like that. Okay, so that's how you break up sums. That is the sum law. you break the sum up into two different limits, okay? Then you're going to look at the product law, which is number 4, and this product of f of x, g of x, you write this like this. So you still have that third root, and underneath that, you're going to have the limit x goes to 1 of f of x, and then times another limit as x goes to 1 of g of x, and then you're going to have that other limit, just bring that down, the limit x goes to 1, 3, like that. Now, again, on a test, if you bypass those first two steps, I'd be okay, because a lot of times students can process this, okay, yeah, this is the way this thing gets broken up. You have the cube root of the whole thing, you got the products of the limits, and then you got that sum like that, okay? Right, that was a little bit harder one because you're now using 3 properties. And then from here, it's just a matter of, well, we know these things. F of x, the limit of f of x was, what was that, 8? Yeah, go ahead. Because I messed up. Okay, thank you for pointing that out. That should be, I think what I was doing was I'm putting everything in the wrong number. So that would be 3, and that would be x is less than 1. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll look at the limits. Let's see, f of x, that limit was 8. G of x was what, 3? So we got that. And then I'll have to talk about what the limit of 3 is because I didn't give that to you. So basically what happens is the limit of 3 as x goes to 1 is equal to 3. Now let me explain why that is. And I'm just going to explain that by using my graphing calculator. And I would hope from your background you know that. Okay, what does the graph of y equals 3 look like? You guys remember anything about that? It's a line that goes like that. That's all it is. So if I graph that on the calculator, the limit has to be 3. So the idea is we're getting close to 1. So if I took this graph on the calculator, if I traced at a value close to 1, like say 0.9999 or something like that, you can see pretty clear it's 3. It's always 3. That's what y equals 3 means. It means y is always 3 and it'll never change. Okay, so that's going to be 3 right there then. So what you're going to end up with then is you're going to end up with the third root of 8 times 3 plus 3. Okay, and you got to do order of operations. You got to multiply before you add the 3. So you're going to have third root of 24 plus 3. So ultimately you get the third root of 27, okay, which pops up maybe a little bit in college algebra. A third root just simply means what number do you multiply out 3 times that would give 27? You know what that is in your head? 3, exactly. I'll show you on the calculator in case you don't know this. Whoops. If you take 3 and multiply it up 3 times, you'll get 27. But where the roots are, if you want to make a note of this, on a graphing calculator, if you press your math button, that's where you'll find the cube root, and that's where you can do any root. Okay, so if you just press math and then you go to option number 4 on this, you know, if you can't do this in your head, then that's how you're going to do it on a TI. If you wanted to do, say, a 5th root, let me just see on this. If you wanted to do a 5th root, you would put a 5 in, then you would go math, and then you go down to this one that says x root, which allows you to do any root you want to. And then like this, I wonder if you guys know this, okay? Anybody know what the 5th root of 32 is? 2. How come? Because 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 32, okay? But you're not always going to know those, so you want to be sure that you have a way to figure those out when they pop up, because they'll pop up every now and then. Okay, so that's how you would do the limit law to work that out. Okay, any questions about what I'm trying to show you with the limit law so far? Okay, the math, the arithmetic's not bad, but I want to see that you can identify the right law and then work these out. Now, I'm only going to have you do maybe 2 of these, and then that'll kind of end this, and then we'll get started on the last part of this section. So this one, I think I gave just the same values, kind of keeping it simple here. I gave you limit of f of x and g of x and h of x. So see if you can work those out. And you all see these properties okay up here on the screen? They look a little small to me, but you can also look back at a few pages on there. So See what you can do on these, okay? All right? Just two problems.